Your medical data is being stolen from you by Big Pharma, and they make billions of dollars every single year off of this data. In today's interview, I had the opportunity to speak with one of the industry experts who is actively trying to give us power back, give us back what Big Pharma stole. The best place to start here would be asking to get a little bit of background about who you are and how you found yourself in this position here today.
I wonder each and every day, Patrick, how I got myself into this position. But the short story that I can give you is that I've always liked entrepreneurial ideas, and not only ideas, I also like to put them into practice. I think it's a family ailment. So my journey started relevant to Genomes DAO. Then it started when in 2011 I moved from the Netherlands, where I'm originally from. I moved to London and started working for a corporate venture capital fund that invested in founders with great ideas in technology, and then specifically how to apply that technology for publishing research. And this corporate venture capital fund is called Digital Science. And I was hired by them as the business development go-to. And in my early days, I was paired up with a founder of a specific company called Figshare. And that founder is Mark Hannell, who's also my co-founder in Genomes DAO. And so Mark and I, we became friends, but where Mark was the scientist, I was kind of the business guy, because I have, by means of background, I have 2 degrees, one in international relations, master's degree, and then a degree in master's in general management, which is kind of like an MBA. And my knowledge as well of the scientific market we were in was crucial to kind of building the product and making sure there were enough clients for it. So Mark and I, we worked together for 3 years. And then at a certain point, I said, like, I need to leave because I had a little something called founder's envy. I was really keen to build my own company, and I could no longer be the advisor or the consultant. I really wanted to have the accountability and responsibility that a founder has. So I left in 2014 and started my own social impact company in education, a company called Teach Pitch, which is a platform that helps teachers overcome the problem of information abundance. So many people in education, specifically educators, are plagued by too much information, too many new technology tools, too many new things coming in. And how do they basically navigate through all that? Also, as gatekeepers of the teaching and learning process, how do they make sure that the good things basically are adopted so that students can use it? And how do they basically make sure that what isn't good is kept out, so to say? So I did that for for 10 years. I'm still the founder, but there's another CEO in town, so I'm no longer the managing director of it. But it grew, and I was able to help loads of people. Mark and I, we stayed friends, and we couldn't help ourselves. We also started talking about new ideas on how to work together. So in 2018, we looked at the idea of where research data is no longer research data. So Mark and I, we were fascinated by research data, big nerds, so to say, kind of, what defines research data and what doesn't, essentially. And we both felt that a line was crossed when it came to DNA, when it came to genomic information, because genomic information is so personal that it can be flipped in any direction, so to say, right? And that basically, that idea gave life to Genomes.io. So essentially what we're doing is we're trying to give the individual patient or the data donor the proper protection, the proper ownership, but also the proper decision-making power on how his or her genomic data is going to be used, and that if there is the proper transparency on that level, then all stakeholders are going to benefit from it, right? So, which is all the way up to the pharmaceutical company or the research organization, or the genetic company that wants to use the data, but still with the full consent and full knowledge of the individual who started the process in the first place.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. When you started that backstory at 2011, I was very concerned as to how it was so early to have a backstory like that in crypto, because like crypto didn't even exist back
Oh
then.
no,
But it
it
was
wasn't.
the relationship building aspect. It's interesting to see that you and Mark had already done stuff in the past to like build out and see how you guys work well together, and then understood both of your use cases together could build something like Genomes DAO at an even stronger foundation. And the reason I even reached out to ask for an interview with you guys is because like I'm very passionate about genome. I am the human genome. Genetics is something that has fascinated me since I was like in 8th grade. I remember building out a research report, I'll put in quotations there, about like telomeres and how we could extend human life with it. And so like it's been something that I've been very intrigued with the entire time. So when I saw that you guys were building a platform to enable true sovereignty over your genetic information, it got me excited, because most people don't understand how much information is truly in our genomes and how valuable that data is. So if you could touch on that a little bit, extend into kind of like truly how valuable this data is.
Yeah, and I think the best way to open there is to say, like, we're just at the very beginning of really knowing what our genome can reveal about ourselves, about us as human beings. And there are two narratives here. One narrative is kind of very much talking about, okay, just give your genomic data, put it on a pile, put it in a big database, and us human beings, we will all benefit from it. So these are conversations like the age of scientific wellness, the what is it, future health, all these overarching, extremely positive kind of organizations that basically say, don't worry about the privacy or the security of it all, just give us the data and then we can learn so much from each other, right? That's basically what they say. And then the other side is slightly more skeptical, saying, well, no, you're not getting my information, very, very keeping things very private, keeping things very in silos still, very much, I think, in extended thinking of how healthcare providers currently also operate, or how many healthcare providers have operated in the past. And so you have those two narratives going against each other. One keeping in silos, keeping everything private, and then the other saying, well, doesn't matter, just throwing all on a big pile and we're going to learn so much, right? And we would like to think of ourselves as something in the middle. And why? It's because we don't think that we should be as naive to say, okay, let's all throw it on a pile and it won't affect us. Don't take it, only from me. So like you've had people like Barack Obama in a recent interview with Vice. He opens whereby he says, like, listen, the way AI is going and how it can be used for interpretation purposes, I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future someone would be able to develop a biological weapon when unleashing malicious AI on something like such a health database, right? Where that is just not looking at the security element, not looking at all at the privacy element, just bringing it all together. It's like if someone wants to do wrong, then they can, right? Then technology will enable them to do so. Unfortunately, right? So that's why we say, okay, you do have something in the middle, whereby what we would like to call kind of a permission-based system which is essentially our infrastructure, whereby your genomic data is vaulted. And only when you give explicit permission for your vault to be used, it can engage in a specific interpretation process, whether this is genomic querying for, the previously stated age of scientific wellness, looking at, for instance, cancer genomics, research for breast cancer, research for prostate cancer, looking at Alzheimer, all diseases that, more and more we realize that there's kind of a genetic connection that can be made, and therefore potentially a cure. So you can participate with that system, but always when the individual gives, the permission for it. So it's kind of like a plugin, if you will, that works on that basis.
Would you be able to go in depth a little bit and kind of explain to the audience, who should have already liked this interview and gone out and checked out all of the socials for Genomes DAO, which I will leave in the description below. But could you kind of go in depth a little bit about what you mean by vaulted? How is it vaulted? Because I thought the blockchain was all public information. So if we were could you go in depth on the process there a little bit?
Yeah, very, very good question, Patrick. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions we hear when people want to describe us quickly. They say, "Oh, genomic data on the blockchain," but that's not what we do, right? We don't put any genomic data on the blockchain. That would be very silly and very careless, and also very expensive, to be honest, to put it there. At the end of the day, the blockchain is a public space, and it goes against the idea of keeping it safe and private. So when we say vaulted, we basically mean encrypted, and we use our own encryption software for that. And our encryption software is built on tools of AMD. So the biggest micro devices company in the world, a multi-billion-dollar organization, and we're very proud that we're able to call ourselves a partner of AMD, specifically when creating these encryption tools. And that is basically what creates the vault, right? The blockchain is applied in such a way that we know we're working with one version of the truth, specifically when the vault is queried. And so how a query takes place, and that brings me to the second misconception. What people think is like, if I give my permission, then my vault will open and then data will still be released. That's not what's happening. The data remains in your vault, but the query is able to take place on your vault, so to say. So the query takes place in a vaulted environment. What the research organization receives is the answer to their research question. And because we have this specific repeat consent protocol, you are able to ask as many questions as you like to kind of further clarify your research, right? To get it to the answers that you would like, through, for instance, the process of elimination. But it's never as such that, once you give permission, your vault opens and that there's any data leakage place, right? The data remains on the infrastructure, which remains vaulted, and the queries take place there. What is developed is essentially a piece of code. So the research question is translated into a coded query, and that coded query is submitted to the vaults, so to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe so. That means that the researchers ask certain questions to the person who provided their genetic information, who got sequenced in the first place. That person gets to decide whether or not they want to allow the query to go through to their personal vault, which contains the genetic information. And then the answers get given back to the researchers, but only the answer. They don't get to search for the answer. The vault or the query is actually doing that. My question there would be, if that's accurate, are you guys deploying a layer of AI to help with that answering? How is it that it is able to sift through? Because you guys sequence like 80+% of the entire genome, correct? How is it able to query through all that? Because I remember when I was working in the lab, we would sequence genetic sequences, that like parts of a genome that were only like 1,000 base pairs, and it would take like an hour and a half to sift through all that. So how is it able to happen so rapidly?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and I've said in many of the spaces that we organize, we don't shy away from using AI in this process, because AI only kicks in at the moment that the vault holder has given permission for it to be used in kind of an interpretative way, right? And I think AI will come in handy just because you're dealing with the sheer amount of vaults, right? We're forecast to go in the tens of thousands of vaults by the end of this year. You can imagine that like sifting through those is going to require, some proper how do you say that, machine learning, technologies to do that. But that can be done in a safe manner, right? That can be done, as I described before, with developing this coded query and letting the code do the selection for you, right? It doesn't, there's no no kind of malicious things happening here, or any data leakage, or it going wrong. So we most certainly do not shy away from using AI, but it's almost like, when do you use it? Using it at the right moment in time. I think that's the most relevant bit here. Whereas currently, AI is just unleashed on data sets that are available in kind of zero protected databases, right? And I'm just astonished to see how little has been invested on the security and the privacy element of genomic data sets to date, right? The fact that in, I think, October, November, 23andMe announced this hack of 6.9 million user records that, where also DNA information was read and kind of used. Those 6.9 million data sets were offered for sale on a dark web forum, right? Now, you think it would stop there, and that 23andMe would, be very ashamed or whatever, but their lawyers, I think, advise them to say, well, 6.9 million users, it's actually a little bit your fault, right? So kind of, instead of saying, mea culpa, I'm so sorry, and, this never should have happened, they kind of turn around and say, well, actually, who's to blame here, right? So I kind of like, the audacity, it kind of doesn't stop, right? And this is after the fact that they have made millions, and I'm not lying, in hundreds of millions, and kind of cross-selling your data, which many of these 6.9 million people weren't aware of in the first place. So it's the exploitation, then the data breach, which is, caused by their, defect security policy, and then turning around and saying, well, it's your fault. So, I don't know how they're going to recover from this. I don't work for them, but I would wonder, like, what's your strategy here? What's your take here? Do you want more clients? Kind of, where are we going to end up here? My point is, it doesn't feel like they thought through the security element of all of this, and also technology, the acceleration of technology and science isn't really helping there, right? Things are going way faster, right? It's not likely to go slower, to slow down at any point in time. You do not know what's going to happen, what's around the corner. So you might as well protect yourself from these things and really take the power in your own hands, assuring that your data is in a vault. And, if you then want to engage and help, research organizations, pharmaceutical organizations, or whoever, to advance their research, then you can, right? But you will give full consent for that. You will be kept in the know as to what it is used for, and I think also very attractively, you will be paid if there's a commercial stake here. You will participate in that commercial stake, which currently you're not doing at all, kind of, if you work with these traditional players.
Yeah, a lot of the traditional players, as you and I know, are just acting as data harvesters. And most people at this point, I think, understand that, like, data is the new oil. It's digital oil. So whoever controls that data, which is only to be harvested from the individual, is going to be massively in a position of power over the next coming decades. So projects, companies who are giving the ability to have sovereignty or ownership over your data, like you guys over at Genomes DAO, I think are going to be massive players as people kind of wake up to the realization. And I think that the 23andMe hack that just happened, where they literally are victim blaming here. They're literally telling it, it's like, it's your fault that your genetic information was just stolen, despite all of our lapses in security. I think that's waking people up to it. I've definitely noticed in the video that I made on it, a lot of social sentiment change happening. A lot of people who were skeptical in the beginning and now have an actual reason to be skeptical of this thing. And I know that I've joined in on a lot of the spaces that you host over on Twitter or X. And this is something that you beat the drum on consistently over there. So props to you guys for being one of the DeSci players who are actually like out here making noise in the community for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the reasons why we did that was we were told, kind of the entrepreneurial journey again, right? When you start something, then loads of people go against you and say, well, it's not going to happen. There's no market for this. No one's going to be interested, kind of all those things. So one of the things we were told is like, oh, individuals don't care enough about their data to do something about this. And we're like, your genome is the blueprint to who you are. It doesn't get more personal than that, right? If an individual doesn't stand up to protect that piece of data, then what are they going to stand up for, right? But that idea, like many people say, well, that hasn't hit yet. And I think those hacks and breaches, even though I don't enjoy them from happening, but it does wake up people. It's like, listen, here's what can happen, right? How, and so in every space, I also say, like, whether you like or dislike us, I want you to take away from this space that if you do not stand up for your data and how your data is used, then no one will, right? No one will. You need to know, as you said, that data is the new oil, and that people are going to make a business out of it, right? My co-founder also always says, like, whether you like it or not, in your lifetime, your genome will be sequenced. Whether you give explicit permission for this, that's the second thing. But it's going to happen, because someone will present you with a piece of paper that you've signed 5 years ago that says, oh, by the by, Patrick, you said that I could do this and that I could keep it and that I could cross-sell it. And you're like, well, I wasn't aware. It's on page 53, paragraph 17. It's like, it's like, well, you should have read the small print here, right? Those things. But that's going to happen, right? That's unfortunately the world we live in, because it's too valuable.
It is. It's very valuable. And people see it, not only the researchers, but even just like major companies, major corporations with targeted marketing campaigns and stuff like that. But I'm curious, speaking from your platform and your perspective, have you seen a lot of researchers coming and trying to engage with the people who have already had their genome sequenced through Genomes DAO? Are you seeing a lot of people actually have that payoff from getting their genome sequenced and being able to sell some of the selected information?
Yeah, so we did our very first anonymously executed, auditable, financially incentivized big query for long COVID back in August. We were the first one ever in the world to do so and executed on that successfully. And I'm happy to say that over 80%, I believe, of our vault holders, if not more, said yes to participating in that. They were compensated with 30,000 gene, right? So it was also a good compensation for them, and they really like that. Ever since we've done that, we have more and more researchers, whether these are big organizations or whether these are individuals with great ideas, knocking on our doors to say, hey, I would like to participate in this because I like the way this is going. I like the way that everyone's happy, and I also like the way that and this is something you should not overlook, that because we keep the data closer with the individual patient or the data donor, it also allows you to go back to that individual for any further questions. It allows you to be a lot more granular in your research than if you're just in a lab and you're looking at a data set that's shelved somewhere of which you do not possess any further information, right? And that happens often, that it is shelved somewhere. You take it, you use it for your research, but you can't really advance your research because you don't have any more information. Because it all stays on the infrastructure, an additional question, naturally with the explicit consent and permission of the vault holder, but it's just a click of a button away, right? You can add phenotypic data to the genotypic data. So you can advance your research by asking more questions to the patients, more questions around what these people are dealing with, right? If you don't want to participate, of course, that's fine, right? You don't have to. We have certain vault holders that say, I'm putting it on your infrastructure because I want everyone to leave me alone, right? That's also fine. You can do that. We would never force you. But if you are interested, you can learn a lot and you can participate a lot. And, frankly, you can make a bit of money.
That's huge for researchers too, because I know the follow-up surveys and the follow-up data after you've answered the initial question, you always get more questions. And so having the ability to just cycle right back without any of that added friction is huge. Do all of if they wanted to cycle back and ask a follow-up question, would they have to go through you guys? Do they have to set up an additional query, or do you have a platform that they're able to use that researchers can go to initiate a proposal or initiate research?
Yeah, so we have on our roadmap to definitely have the latter of what you said. Like, we would love to create an API where everyone can just come and ask their question. And then, if they have a piece of code or technology, they can easily work with our vaults to kind of advance whatever research it is they're working on. Currently, we are still the middleman, meaning, you need to knock on our doors. We take it to our bioinformaticians. And, that's how the survey comes together. Just because it's early days, right? I said before, we did the first one of this in August. I talk about it very easily, but it takes a lot to get it built, to get it right, to make sure it's safe, it's private, it has all the bells and whistles that you're looking for. We're very happy that we're there. But currently, we're still the middleman in that. So someone knocks on our door, and we help them to further develop their survey or query, and from there on, the journey comes to a satisfactory end. But yes, we hope that in a year's time, we're going to have that API, and that everyone can just go there and say, hey, I'm interested in looking for the athletic gene, seeing if genetically you can say whether someone can become an athlete, yes or no, or allergies, or the epigenome, or kind of any other exciting question around that. And that's the point to what we said in the beginning. We're still very much at the beginning here to really understand what our gene can tell us, right? It's really the very, very, very beginning of things. So can you imagine how exciting this world is, and how much more information will be unlocked in the very near future?
That's something I'm super excited about, that because I've been under the firm belief that maybe not in this decade, maybe it's going to take a little bit more time. The cost to sequence is going to have to come down a little bit more, which it is rapidly decreasing from the first time we sequenced a human genome, when it cost like $1 billion or some ridiculous number like that. It is rapidly coming down. I'm a firm believer that eventually it'll be so widespread that when you go in for your checkup, or you go to get a physical every like 5 years or 3 years or whatever, they're going to be sequencing your genome or looking at your epigenetics to see if you're developing any biomarkers for disease, or if you're getting any at-risk areas for different things that they should be paying attention to. So I think what we will be able to do with the human genome 10, 15 years from now, we can't even fully comprehend right now. It does kind of segue into a question I have, is what is some of the things that they are capable of, or what are some of the things that you're seeing out there that look like they're right on the horizon as far as what might be capable with research on the human genome?
Oh, there's so much. I mean, not a week goes by that I read something new that I'm like, are you serious? It's like, can you do this? I think one of the things that amazed me, because we were looking for such a long time at the privacy element of it, is that if I have your DNA, I can, without knowing your name, without knowing anything about you, but I would be able to do a facial reconstruction of you, right? So I would be able to have this robot picture, that the police uses.
That's crazy.
Here's what Patrick looks like, which I think is insane, right? I think
it's going to make forensic a lot easier.
Yeah, it's going to make forensics a lot easier. And I'm just like, that's crazy. But you can. And this is also one of the reasons that I think many of the direct-to-consumer genetic companies, they say, oh, you can anonymize. Don't worry, your data is anonymized. But what they mean is, we've taken your name off the tin. It doesn't say Patrick on that genome, but that's not, they can still find out it's Patrick, right? If you have just a small piece of data, I can compare it with a public health database and might find some of your relatives in there, like a far cousin or a first cousin or brother, sister, whatever, and then I can trace it back to you, right? So that's a way of doing it. And now this one, does it go like, well, I am able to find out what this person looks like, right? So you can define the gender. That's that's not a secret. So there are so many things that you can do that you can argue like there's no such thing as anonymized DNA, right? So if anyone tells you that, I'm afraid they're not being truthful. That what they mean is we've taken your name off, so don't worry, they won't call you tomorrow. But with a little bit of research and clever technology, they are able to find you. So I think so. And I think then all the ones that are about gene editing, whereby I think the FDA has just approved using gene editing for sickle cell disease, right? So, and there are the first patients who are enjoying kind of that process that you could really change and alter someone's life through this gene editing, which I think in CRISPR, which I think is amazing, right? That's really like, that's progress. That's really like a new way of curing people of diseases that previously were incurable, right? So, and using your genome as kind of the core part of it, which I think is amazing. So I always love those stories, and I only encourage them. I think that's research that we should want to be a part of, right? And don't get me wrong, because I think often people say, well, if you want to keep the data vaulted, you are against that. So no, it's the opposite. We want to make it more personalized. We want to make it more individual in such a way that it becomes transparent and equitable for everyone. What the people forget, the people that talk about the age of scientific wellness and the future of health and kind of all those things, is that there's only one winner, which is the intermediary. It's the lab where all the data goes to. None of that information goes back to the individual, right? And then and they expect people to say, hooray, I've given you my data, so now humans will win. It's like, well, no, as an individual, you can do better in this day and age where we have these decentralized technology, right? So why not, right? That's the question. Why not?
Yeah, very briefly, I have two questions. One, you guys have your own not forensic, but your own labs in which you have to do the sequencing with to begin with. Like, you have to still submit a sample. What practices are you guys taking to make sure that that sample either gets destroyed or that the scientists don't make copies of the data?
Yeah, so correction, we don't have our own labs, right?
Oh, okay.
We would love to have our own labs, but you do have to know that setting up a lab, that's just starting cost is $1 million, right? If that. So you need $1 million plus to get a lab going, to get a proper sequencing machine, to get all of that done and dusted. I'm very happy that myself, I work in BioHub here in Aberdeen, whereby we would have the ability to open a wet lab. So we do that working closely with the university here and whatever. So it's definitely on the card, but currently we don't, right? So in answer to your question, what we currently have is we work with sequencing partners. One of them is a Harvard-based laboratory. We work with them. We have robust auditable contracts with them, that if basically they were to do anything, they were to keep a copy of the data or to keep any data remnants, we could sue them, right? So it's through it's with the lawyer, so to say, and we can escalate if that were to go wrong, right? So we rely on those contracts for the sequencing until we can open our own laboratory.
Nice. Okay, that's good clarity, because I know people in my Discord were asking about that. Second question, and let me know if you can't talk about this part, but I see here that you guys have genetic cats, an NFT project that's on your website. I'm curious, what the hell are they?
Yeah, so I mean, we also went on the NFT bandwagon. When was this? I believe 2022, early 2022, whereby, well, yeah, I know there's a lot of talk about an NFT having a utility, right? So we felt like, okay, if we can combine, um, you know, our proposition of a vault and a kit together with an NFT, then that's great. And that basically gave life to the genetic ads. We, back then we had, we now have a thriving, growing community. Back then we were smaller as a community, but the community was hungry for it because they said like, oh, I'd love to buy a kit. I'd love to have this vault, but what can you add kind of in the, in the DeFi world, or what can you add of value, on that level? And then that's why we came up with an NFT and did an NFT sale that, we did very well, and kind of starting that. It's just another way of basically selling our kits. Similar to the NFT sales, we also did a sale on a platform called Indiegogo that you might know, which is just, this Kickstarter like platform whereby, early on ideas people can sell. We sold out within half an hour there, right? So it's finding your way to the consumers, finding where they are. And we engaged with multiple creative ideas to kind of find our community essentially, and Genetic Ets was one of them.
Which in some ways brings it full circle to the beginning, to have your experience. So it's good to have someone on the team like yourself who like knows what he's doing in that regard, knows how to bring something to market and garner the community there. So I like that. It's very interesting to see. You guys are willing to try many different ways to get people's attention, to get people on board with this idea of owning your own genetic information.
I think you have to, right? It's just ways of getting in touch with people. We rely a lot on our community and the ideas of our community. Our spaces are very open. I always invite people to come and talk. They can be as critical as they would like, as long as they're respectful. We want to learn from our community, right? That's the only way to do it. I also think that that's what's going to set DeSci apart, right? When we're talking about this new narrative, I think those DeSci initiatives that can produce a real product, which is really based on a thriving community, a community that gives feedback, that uses the product not only in year 1 but in year 2, 3, 4, 5, that have a utility for it. Those are the ones that are going to succeed. If you're just kind of bringing a story out there that has a token, and kind of you want support for the token but are never going to produce a product, then you're going to be gone within the year. So what's your legacy then? What are you leaving behind? And for us, life's too short. We really want to be successful here, and kind of make sure that we can ideally help people on all levels, right? But most importantly, building that product. And you don't have a product if you don't have a user, and you don't have a user if you basically do not receive any feedback as to what that user sees, and where you can do better, right? We need to be continuously in this product improvement cycle to be better, and to outperform our competitors, but also to service our clients.
I couldn't agree more. There's a stark difference between seeing blockchain and trying to build something to use blockchain for the sake of using it, and having a product or a service that might benefit from blockchain. I think there's a stark difference there. I really appreciate you taking the time answering a lot of these questions with me. Is there anything else that you were dying to cover that we didn't quite touch on today in this?
No. I really appreciate you interviewing me and giving some time and attention to Genomes DAO. It's very much appreciated. Other than kind of our spaces and our upcoming podcast, the Gene, which we're working on with our producers and whatever. It's just like, stay in touch. It's like, be open to have the conversation. We're very grateful for this growing community of people who have similar ideas as we have, and we look forward to talking to them and engaging with them, whichever platform it is, whether it's Telegram, Discord, or Twitter, or just old-fashioned email. We're all up for it. So yeah, thank you for spending some time with me here.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I encourage everyone who's watching this right now Go check out the links that I put down below. Get involved in the community. If you have more questions, I know they've been very welcoming to me and to people that I've talked to who have reached out and asked questions. So absolutely, you got lots of presence across social media. I hope you guys found as much value out of that interview as I did. I'm watching their Twitter closely, and I actually saw them post a screenshot the other day showcasing that users of their platform, people who had chosen to get sequenced by Genomes DAO, have already made back more money than it costs to get sequenced off of these deals that they're able to use. So my mind is blown. Make sure you guys smash that like button, and remember that time is your most valuable asset. Invest it wisely.